Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jackie Orr from NASCAP. We are really happy that you are able to join us this afternoon. I just want to do a few housekeeping things before we get started into the webinar. Everyone, all of you should be muted, so we're going to keep you that way until the end of the webinar. We're going to leave time at the end to have a discussion. At that point, we'll unmute everybody so that you could ask your questions. Now, meanwhile, if you have a question, you can type it into the chat window and send it to all panelists, and we'll see it, and then we'll just save it for the end and ask it at that point. This way, we can make sure we get through the entire presentation. So I want to let you know that this presentation, we actually did parts of it. We had a little bit less time than we do now at the NASCAS conference last week, and it was very well received, and I knew that not everybody was going to be at the NASCAS conference and that we might need to do it for a wider audience. So thankfully, Beverly, Chris, and Michelle all agreed to do it as a webinar. So this gives us, everybody who wasn't at the conference, the opportunity to hear what they had to say. And for those of you who were at the conference, you have another opportunity to ask questions. So with that, I'm going to just move the slide along and let you know that our three panelists for today are Beverly Buchanan. Beverly is the CSBG Program Manager from Arkansas. And then we also have Michelle Fields, and Michelle is the Program Director working in the state of Tennessee. And then we have Chris Schenow from the Executive Director from Michigan. So all of these states were recently received an OCS assessment. Beverly's assessment in Arkansas was done in 2016, and then Michelle was in the spring of 17, and then Chris was the most recent. I think Chris was in the August of 2017. So since they had recent assessments, we thought that it would be great if they could share with you their experiences and to share with you, what they learned and how they prepared, because we always get questions about, okay, we're going to be having an OCS assessment, or, oh, we haven't, and we know we're going to be getting one soon, and what should we do to prepare ourselves? So we've divided up sort of the presentation into what the states did to prepare themselves for the assessment, and then what the on-site assessment was like, and then any follow-up and any recommendations following the assessment. So we have it divided up into those three different sections. Before we get into specifics, each of the state representatives are going to give a brief overview of their state. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Beverly from Arkansas, and she's going to kick it off with telling you a little bit about her state and the CSBG in her state. So Beverly.
Again, hello and welcome everyone. I'm Beverly Buchanan, CSBG Manager in Arkansas. We, at the time of our assessment, we had 16 community action agencies. Our annual CSBG allocation is roughly $9.6 million. We spend the 5% on admin and 5% for discretionary. We're housed in the Arkansas Department of Human Services, Division of County Operations, and call ourselves the Office of Community Services. There's myself and 3 grants analysts to administer the program.
Okay, Beverly, I'll turn it over now to Michelle in Tennessee.
Welcome, everybody. Here in Tennessee. Can you hear the next slide? All right. Our mission in Tennessee is to offer temporary economic assistance and work opportunity and protect services to improve the lives of Tennesseans. And as you can see, that incorporates a wide range of support and services through our vision, core values, and our motto, and how we work as a learning organization. Now, Tennessee, my department works in collaboration with the Family Assistance, Child Support, and Rehab Services. I fall under Community and Social Services that it aligns with Adult Protective Services, Child Care, CACFP, and the Summer Food Program, along with SSBG. We have 20 community action agencies covering our 95 counties. That incorporates both the nonprofit and public, 5 of which are human resource agencies and 4 LPAs, limited purpose agencies. We work in collaboration with both TECA, our association, and the Tennessee Association of Human Resource Agencies, received over $13 million. When I first received notice of this audit, it was just me, myself, and I. By the time OCS came to visit, I did have 4 FTEs and 31 direct providers, and I'm located in Nashville, Tennessee. So next.
Now, is that done with you, Ms. Michelle? Is that your?
Yep.
Okay,
yep.
Great. Then I'm going to turn it over to Chris, and she's going to tell us a little bit about CSBG in Michigan.
Hi, I'm Ms. Chris Shano. I'm an Executive Director for the Bureau of Community Action. The slide you see represents the state of Michigan. We have 29 community action agencies, and you see some of them are very small agencies with one county, and some have several counties. We cover all 83 counties in our state. Next slide. This kind of describes a little bit about what we do. CSBG, we receive about $26 million annually. I also administer the Weatherization Assistance Program and a small energy assistance program. I have currently 18 full employees that work for me, and we are building a weatherization training center, so I'll be hiring a lot more people. We're looking at maybe 10 other positions in my state. I'm housed in Lansing. The OCS audit just occurred this summer, August. We had a good opportunity to learn more about OCS and what they did and how they look at states, so I'll be happy to share our experience with you. Next slide.
I'm sorry, we moved up too fast.
This just is a quick breakdown of the dollars. We do 90% of the block grant to the community action agencies, 29 of them in the state. Out of that, 6 of them are public agencies. I've got small agencies and all the way down to small agencies. We do discretionary grants as well, where we have about $351,000 for asset building, innovative programs, other projects which are capacity building. We have 2 Native American grants, training and technical assistance grants with our state association, and we try to get our small agencies up to a minimum amount of $175,000 with some discretionary grants. I think gives you a little bit of a background of Michigan, and I'm looking forward to sharing more with you in this presentation.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, all 3 of you, for sharing some information about your states. That gives us a good ground. So now, as I mentioned, we are going to start with what the states did to prepare for their state assessment, and who's going to be kicking us off in this area is Michelle from Tennessee. So, Michelle, I turn it back over to you.
Hi. Our first indicator was that NASCAP sent me an email asking for our CSBIS report. And I asked, so what does that mean? And that's when they advised that OCS would be, there was a likelihood that they would be coming out and doing an assessment. So my first initial steps was basically to attitude, my attitude in regards to the situation, and look at the situation as a learning opportunity for that continuous improvement, and to have a baseline since I was new in my position, to know what did I need to do moving forward. the other thing is we had already had internal discussions about having an internal audit done. We just had not done it at that point. So knowing that OCS was coming, I went ahead and requested an internal audit. That audit ended up focusing primarily in regards to data reliability as it relates to the CSBGS report, but they did look at some other factors as well. Then my first resource that I referenced was the M102, Information Memorandum 102, the CSBG monitoring checklist, and started to go through that to see what to have and what steps I needed to take in preparation for the assessment. But we have a great resource out there, and that great resource is NASCAP. You know, when I first started, I knew that NASCAP was our partner and as in a learning opportunity, but NASCAP, or in particular, really brought it forward to provide a great learning opportunity. And what did is she got together all the states like you that are probably on the phone today that are preparing to have an OCS assessment. And the main person who at that point had already had an assessment was Beverly. Beverly walked us through all of the information related to the OCS assessment, how many people would be there, what kind of arrangements would be made, what kind of room arrangements needed to be made, what kind of interview and questions, what kind of all the things that we'll be talking to you about today. And because she did that, I was much more prepared in general and had vision of what that would look like. And then by the time OCS called and explained to me the planning, logistics, the entrance and the exit interview, and the documentation, I already had a frame of reference that coincided exactly with what Beverly had talked about. For me, they ended up to have 3 people come to our office, and it ended up being that there was 4 people who came to the office, but everything fell in place. Then information about requesting initial documentation, and as far as that initial documentation of some background information that they needed, in particular with financial system and how was that set up and what did that look like. So what we ended up, that we had about 4 months of preparation before that they would arrive. And although the CSB monitoring tool was a great tool, the CSB, the self-assessment tool for state offices, really became key. We did not find that initially. I think it was developed in between time as a result of some of the work that Jackie Orr did with Beverly out of Arkansas. And because the self-assessment tool does that the CSBG monitoring checklist does not, it really incorporates everything from the performance standards. It incorporates the organizational standards and then the state accountability measures, which would be new to our network within the last, 4 to 5 years. So, also did some interdepartmental planning and coordination with budget, fiscal, procurement, and audit services. In our state, those are, but yet we work together. So we have separate units for budget, fiscal, procurement, and audit services. So I had to coordinate our efforts in our conversations with OCS, getting documentation together, any particular request that would be in and have a coordinated response. then we also conducted an internal audit of our records. So move on.
Great. And yes, so these are the two checklists that Michelle was referring to. So Michelle, I can let you talk about this one.
Well, it was the first checklist we started to use, but then as I mentioned, it ended up being a great resource and probably provides a lot of detail. As you can see, even with the first example, it gives a lot more of that detail. The other one, if you want to move on to the second one, is self-assessment tool. It has links. It has the hyperlinks to where you need to go and to be able to have that information that is needed and is requested. And one of the keys is of how I organize my files. It organizes them. As you see here, you have a title, Regulatory Compliance and Management, and then each of the subtitles of CSB Organizational Standards, the State Accountability Measures. So I organize each of my records to guide with that. And since I had new staff, I also, they got a deep dive into learning all about CSB as we prepared. And thankfully that they were there to help provide me that support. But in the process, they also learned a lot about CSBG because these things help to exactly where you need to go to find the information that you need. But it's not only information that you as the director need to know, your staff need to know. And my understanding, although OCS did not ask my staff, it is my understanding that we may ask them, do you know where to find this information? Do you know how to access this information? And when I talked to my eligible entities, they did ask them, do you know how to access this information? Do you know where this information is? So it's important for you, your staff, and your agencies to be aware of where all of this information can be found. Moving on to the next slide.
Okay, thanks, Michelle. I did just want to add here that Michelle's correct, it was updated, but it was originally a tool that NASCAS put together, and I think it was in 2012. So last year in 2017, Katie Kajowski, Lauren Cook, and myself, we updated it, and excuse me, as Michelle mentioned, that we had to incorporate some of, obviously the organizational standards were something that was new, as well as there were more recent IMs that weren't in there. So basically we took it and we updated it and we made some changes in it. So I'm glad that you found it useful, Michelle, and I know some of the other state offices have as well. So it is on the NASCAP's website if you're looking for it. And it's our management CSBG and state office tool. So if you can't find it and you want it, just let me know. And I'll turn it to Michelle.
I guess to be able to explain, because in part of the preparation, I'm a little old school. I didn't know if they wanted any paperwork associated with that. So I had two binders. I had one binder that has all the policy, procedures, laws, and one binder references. And then I had another binder that had our working documents. I also had saved all of that to our hard drive to be able to access very quickly and easily if they wanted me to email any of those documents. So I kind of was prepared two tools if they wanted an actual hard document or they wanted it electronically. So kind of give you a little bit of a guide of where to start. Then, as I mentioned, the staff that were involved was audit services, budget, fiscal, contracts, procurement, legal, and program and administrative staff. Everybody had a role and responsibility in preparing for assessment and during assessment. the materials gathered, they will send you a document asking for specific materials. They call it source documents, mainly in relation to fiscal and the general ledger, and how drawing down your funds, but they ask for some other documents as well. Checklists and work documents that I've already referenced that. And the used again, I've referenced that. So what preparation occurred for the CAA visits? I think that's more the next slide. So for me, we had a few discussions back and forth in regards to the preparations. They wanted to know what agencies were doing well, what kind of successes, like some of the successes of some of those agencies. They also wanted to know what was not working well. If I had any agencies that were on TAPs or QIPs, they wanted to know, or maybe at risk, and to be able to identify two that were doing well and two that were not doing so well. When it came down to it, they did select 3 agencies. All ended up being more centrally located to Nashville. One was a little bit further, and I think further than they realized. I think they thought it was the town next to Nashville instead of an hour and a half away. So maybe one to help as far as guidance is if they realize that they're picking one that's a further distance away, you may want to help to remind them that it's an hour away, an hour and a half away, and planning and coordination. But they did not identify what agencies they wanted until 5 days before. One agency, the staff even was on vacation in Florida. But they called in their main program staff in from vacation to be able to answer some of OCS's questions on the day of the assessment. The other agencies were able to be available for them. Some questions that they said that they would ask and review was the overview of the agency, kind of, who do they serve. They could provide a tour of the facility, provide a PowerPoint presentation. However they wanted to present themselves, that's good for them. Their success stories, some of their best practices, challenges that they may have with us as a state, challenges they may have within the community, anything else that the agency would like to present or discuss. But in the entrance interview, they did all advise that they wanted to understand how agencies correlated their data to the IS report. And I know in speaking to agencies that they did try to walk through that process and what that process actually looked like. So, Chris or Beverly, I think this is the last of my slides in regards to this session. Do you have anything else you want to add? So I guess I have one more slide or two. Apologies. So this shows the timeline. So this shows the actual sequence from when OCS first requested our report and all the steps that went into preparing. And that's just phone calls, meetings, and sending emails to OCS and internally. So now we should be good. And it's still the time. I get the one thing to add here. I'm not getting paid by NASCAP by saying this, but Jackie, we had our annual TACA conference back prior to our OCS assessment, and she walked through with me everything everything on our checklist, what might be potential concerns, issues, and we walked and talked through that prior to OCS coming. So that in itself was amazing to be able to think, okay, how can I mitigate some, if you know that you have a potential issue, how do I mitigate that as an issue? Ideally, you could, you might want to think about that prior to 2 weeks prior, but it ended up being pretty good in regards to having sounding board and having that level of expertise to talk and walk you through that process. So, Chris and Belly, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
This is Chris from Michigan. I think I have a few slides.
Okay.
It's very similar to yours, Michelle. We did about 7 months heads-up notice about the assessment, so we did have plenty of time. It really doesn't start picking up until about 3 months out, where you get that engagement letter. But so you have a few months before to work with your staff and use those checklists. Those are really important. It starts to pull your information together. You can evaluate the time frame. Once you get that engagement letter, you'll get an exact time frame that OCS will be monitoring. So that's helpful for you. That's one of those key pieces of data that you really need. When you do know about, you'll get an informal call that they'll start to talk about when they want to come visit. They usually hold maybe 2 weeks for you to kind of take care of. I would recommend making sure your staff holds those 2 weeks on their calendar, and any other partners in your state office that you will want present for the OCS on-site visit. Make sure that they put it on their calendar right away. We don't, having people go on vacation is tough, so if you can let them know 5 to 7 months out, that's really good. This is just a time frame. If you go to the next slide, we can talk a little bit about some of the different steps that maybe Michelle didn't dive into. She talked about identifying the different partners in your state office. If it's finance and contracting unit, we did the same thing. We also, when we had those tentative weeks held, we started to book conference rooms here for when they came for the interviews that they would be conducting. So we held several rooms at that time. And we also started to take a look at the data, the source documentation, and we tried to figure out a way that would be the best in getting it transported to OCS. Some of your states can use Dropbox. That's a great solution for you, where you can upload files and then OCS can go in and grab the files for you. In our state, we can't use Dropbox. So we worked with our IT department right away, and they set up, it's an old system, it's called FTP, File Transfer Protocol, but it works kind of the same way, where we'd log in and load up electronic documents, and then OCS, we did short training with them. They got a username and password, and they pulled documents down. It was a great process versus sending electronic documents via email, and it was that last 3 months before the OCS visit we'll start sending a lot of documents to them. They have a lot of requests. It's almost every other day they'll start asking for documents. We sent about 345 documents to the FTP site after we received that engagement letter. One of the things that OCS commented on is that we had very good file naming conventions, so they could easily find the documents that they were looking for. Next slide. There for this is kind of a snapshot of some of the information we have in an Excel file. We have the category of the type of document, and then kind of a little bit of a description of what the document was. And then in Excel, we had a link to those electronic documents on our shared drive. And then when we started to upload the files to FTP site, we used this Excel file to track what we uploaded and date we uploaded it and what staff was responsible for that particular document. So we organized data by just general CSBG, finance, monitoring, organization. We have more categories, but I just wanted to give you a little bit of a feel of some of the documents that we collected prior to the engagement letter and prior to seeing them. It just gave us a sense of what we had our fingertips on to make it easy for us during the on-site assessment and during the pre-assessment where we did our files. Next slide. So playing with OCS meeting, we did have a call, and it's really important. We have everybody at the table, so from finance to budget to contract unit to quality assurance, my program monitors, my finance monitors, all my staff was available for this call. OCS then walked us through the engagement letter. In the engagement letter, if you look, it's kind of towards the middle of your screen where it says general ledger data to include detailed transactions. Those 3 bullets were actually listed on our engagement letter. Those were some of the main things that they wanted. I think it was about 3 months out. So they want to take a good look at your general ledger during the time frame that they're looking at. They wanted to know any corrective action plans that state had was on. They also wanted to look at drawdown procedures and how we got reimbursed. So really financial in nature at first. So we sent a lot of documents in the beginning. This was before they identified the agencies that they were going to visit. They started to ask us questions similar to Michelle about the agencies that are doing great work and agencies that might need some help. What we decided to do in our state is send OCS a copy of our risk assessment scores. So we had each agency with the risk assessment score and then where their headquarters was located. They were looking for us to give us the top 3 or 5 agencies that we would consider be the best choices for them to visit. We thought it would be best that they had the risk assessment scores and then they could guide. I think with our state, they were looking at some very particular agencies to visit. Obviously, they visited our largest agency in Detroit, and it was just a couple years ago that this agency took over other agency that we had closed in the city of Detroit. So it was an obvious choice for them to visit that agency. And then we have another agency that we're rebuilding community action in one of our sites, and they wanted to take a look at those efforts, so they decided to go to Muskegon. This agency, while they're rebuilding community action, we encourage a shared service agreement with a sister agency on the other side of the state. They're called Human Development Commission, and they were asked to participate in the site visit. So they picked 3 strategic agencies, and they all have good qualities, and they all had a meet for OCS to hear and learn about them. One thing I think Jackie was interested in us sharing a little bit about the site visits is, you can change to the next slide. This is just real quick on the next slide, just a copy of the FTP, but I'm going to just speak on the visits to our agencies. Our agencies, since they're building communication in their area, was going through a transition of leadership. So the executive director had just left, and they didn't have a new executive director. So they were worried about the visit. We did contact OCS with our concern and also the concern of the agency, but they assured us that they really did want to go visit this agency. We asked exactly what was the scope of the site visit, and David Berry, who was the chief auditor for us, sent us a great email. They said that they just wanted the purpose of their visit was to evaluate the state in accordance with the SBG Act. That they also noted that the department, as far as OCS, did not have a relationship with the CAA, so they would not issue any formal report. That visit would only last 2 to 4 hours, and they wanted to evaluate the agency in a way to make sure that they understood poverty in their service area. They wanted to see the relationship with the state program office. They wanted to see support that they've received by the state association. The process for implementing and reporting organizational standards, they wanted to hear how that was working out for the agency. And wanted to know how Roma data was captured. So, I mean, it's pretty thick scope that they were looking at when they go visit the agencies. Other things, they wanted to know if they received additional support from national partners such as CAP and CAP Law. They also like to know about any information the entity about their effective programs. So just looking at how they operated, looking at other ways of getting information into the KAA so they could build capacity and have effective programs. That was helpful, and that made our agencies feel a lot better. I shared this email I got from David with all 3 agencies. Oh, next. One of the things that there's this last.
I'm sorry, I went too far
Yeah,
forward.
that's okay. I thought we took this slide out, but so planning the on-site visit again 1 month prior. I would really on your calendar block that 1 month before they come. Just block it off because you're going to need a lot of time coordinating the visits at the CAAs, especially like Michelle said. She only had 5 days notice to coordinate with those agencies. I had a month. It was a lot better. First I did with the agencies, I notified them. I asked them if they wanted to telephone conference so we could go through what I knew. I asked each of my agencies to send me a OCS assessment coordinator so I could refer their contact information to OCS. And we started to draft agendas and timelines for each of the agencies of when OCS would be going there and when they would be leaving and what time lunch would be served and prepping them for the visit. And then that last month, you're sending a lot of files. You're sending OCS the monitoring report files, the contract files, your financial reports, your FSRs for those agencies to OCS. So there's a lot of coordination and sending of files that happens that last month right before the OCS assessment on-site starts. I think next slide is, and the next slide is just a copy of some draft agendas. On all the agendas, I made sure we had contact information for everyone, the OCS team, the Bureau team, and then what would occur when got there and what days. And just in case somebody got lost, I had my cell phone number on there. We didn't want this to go bad for anybody, and we wanted to make sure that everyone knew where they were supposed to be and at what time and what day. Next slide. I think we're ready for the on-site.
Yes, we are. Oops.
The on-site visit. So after you do all
sorry. Sorry.
Yeah.
I thought I was funny, and I was.
Michelle, I'd like to add something to the prep if we could.
Good. I was just going to ask you, Beverly. Yes,
okay.
please do.
Okay. And what I'm hearing and what we heard at the conference, it appears that there actually is, although we stress the month before, we stress 3 months before, I think there's not really any cut in stone as to how of the timeline. I found out that we were going to be assessed in February of 2016, but we knew we were going to be, the visit was going to be in August because soon after they actually sent a document request list with most of all of the documents that both Michelle and Chris have talked about, but they asked us to go ahead and send those documents like before we read our engagement letter. They wanted all the policies and procedures and those things. They wanted us to start sending the financial pieces. So in June, I think, I was in D.C. at the NASCAP board meeting, and I was in a great amount of, I was really stressed, and I talked to Jackie about it, and she and Janae agreed that they would come to Arkansas and actually hold my hand through the process of organizing all my information. As Michelle said, I don't get paid by NASCAP, but I can't stress enough how important it is to get NASCAP involved in your organization, in the process of getting your documents together, because that's going to be key, having everything organized. I wanted 3 years of monitoring reports along with the corrective action. So Chris said that's a great deal of information that you have to send them. One of the things that Jackie and Janae to me was those same documents that I sent to OCS. I would have those same documents available for the day of the visit, for the week of the visit, and that proved to be true because all they asked for a lot of information before they got there. They wanted to see the same information upon arrival. And the way they treated the 3 on-site visits, they already prepared a financial analysis of each agency 990, and so they have an idea of the financial strength of each agency before they started talking to me about which ones they wanted to see. I have the luxury of the self-assessment tool because it had not been updated at the time of our on-site visit, but I did have Jackie and Janae, and that was invaluable to me. So in addition to everything that you heard about the preparation, I think everybody's timeline will be different. So you know that you're going to that assessment. If you know your date, that's wonderful and good. But if you don't have that final date, at least start preparing now with these documents, because I don't think the documents actually, the information that they ask for doesn't really change. It maybe changes a little bit in the order, but I think basically they ask for the same thing, especially the financial information.
Great. Thank you, Beverly and Michelle and Chris. That was a very thorough description of the preparation that you took for the site visit. So now we're going to be talking specifically about the on-site visit. And I think I'm turning it over for Chris for you to start first. Is that right?
I think so, but this part of the presentation, I think we all just kind of chimed in. So we're going to do our best to share with you our experience with the on-site visit. And the on-site visit, I think I was just going to kick us off. We're going to talk about, what the materials, like Beverly said, you should always have the materials that you started to provide, prior to the visits ready and available, because they're looking at those things, they're trying to make sense of those things, and they're trying to tie back to some specific questions in their monitoring tool template. When it came on site, we had 5 different auditors. They took a couple days in the field, one day with Wayne Metro, our big agency, and then they split the site visit the next day with 2 other agencies. But they said people worked with us, and they had multiple interviews going on at the same time. I had one interview room with just financial questions, cost allocation, budget, and they had another room that was all programmatic. If it was the CSBG contracting, how we did TNTA, while we used the discretionary dollars, and what our policies and procedures were, and how we tracked those things. So we had a couple things going on during that week. Our visit only lasted about 4 days. They were supposed to be here 5 days, but they were able to get done on late on Thursday, and then they decided to do an exit conference. They start the on-site visit with an entrance conference, so that you'll be able to talk with them and get an idea of what they're going to look for and how they're going to conduct the on-site visit. And just have everybody ready at the entrance and exit and available during the times that they can talk. They come in and out of your office. It's amazing. They ask for things and then they disappear. So I recommend having a nice room for them to work out of, where they can collaborate amongst themselves and answer their questions and then come back and get feedback from you. But did you experience the same thing, Michelle and Beverly?
Yeah, this is Michelle. I would say that as far as the other thing to add about the entrance and the exit interview, they will have PowerPoints that they'll provide to you maybe a day or two prior to the entrance interview and the exit interview, which sizes each of the point process and what that looks like. Also, in the exit interview, they'll highlight what the strengths were in that, what observations that they had, and any potential findings. So they'll be clear, open, and transparent about what that process was that occurred and what that looked like. But during the entrance interview, if you want to highlight what you are doing well, that's your opportunity. I'm going back and forth. But that's your opportunity to likewise highlight what you're doing well and some of your strengths, and to be able to talk about you as a state, as agencies, what's working well. But I have to say that while it ends up being kind of a big blur because they are they're meeting with you, they're meeting with fiscal, they're budget and monitoring, so they're conducting multiple interviews, and since at the same time, for us, we have one central location that they worked out of in a conference room, and then they did the interviews within each of our departments because they're on different floors for interviews. But it ends up being a big blur, and they ask for limited documentation while there. Most of the documentation that they needed for the process was given to them beforehand, given to them during the preparation. And so as long as you have done everything in preparation, the OCS assessment itself will probably smoothly, and the exit interview and the response will go smoothly. So I have to add, Beverly, do you want to add anything?
Are we on site?
Yeah, on site.
Okay. For on site, there were three of the auditors came to us, and while they were at our office, there was always one emphasis, and the other two made the to the community action agencies, and so it was they turns going to the different agencies, but there was always one in the office, and whatever they needed, I had to accompany them to fiscal or to whatever other department they needed to be at, and every day they switched. Everyone was there with me, but they asked almost the same questions every day, so I had to remember the story, and I'm sticking to it. every day. So it was almost as if someone thought I was going to change my story every day. So I had to say the same thing because they went over the same material every day. They stayed for 3.5 days, and everything they asked me for before they got there, they wanted it. They wanted the same things while they were there. So I think it's a little different everywhere I go, but all the documentation that I had sent them, they really wanted to see it when they were here on site.
Okay. Thank you, Beverly. Michelle or Chris, do you have anything you want to add?
I really like what Michelle said, and we did the same thing. Highlight something you're particularly proud of. Maybe you're doing something innovative. In the state of Michigan, we demonstrated our risk assessment database and the thought behind it. I think it's an important opportunity for you to showcase something that your state's doing that's maybe a little different, and then also pick their brain on some of the other things that maybe they're not there to talk to you about, but we talked about WIOA and different kind of things help kind of get an idea of what the national kind of outlook is. So they're there to help you as well and to learn about what they're doing. But it was a good experience for us.
Oh, good. Okay, we'll wrap up. And then remember, if you think of any questions, you can chat them in or save them. And when we finish up here with the presentation, we'll open it up for discussion. All right, so now we're going to talk about, well, we talked a little bit already about the exit interview. We'll talk about the recommendations, the actual report, and any recommendations and follow-ups that the state engaged in. So, Beverly, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Jackie. At our exit interview, I think it was Michelle that mentioned that they actually have the PowerPoint at the entrance and at the exit interview. And in the exit interview, the PowerPoint things that they wanted to consider. They wanted us to consider implementing the assessment tool to address areas of noncompliance with the tripartite board, and basically also wanted us to make sure that in our policies that we had a definite time frame for vacancies to be filled. They wanted us to reach out to our Head Start liaisons for updates on their eligible entities. And we actually were receiving monitoring reports from Head Start and WAP and LIHEAP when we were on-site monitoring. So they just wanted us to actually incorporate those. They want us to find our findings and deficiencies to be presented for clarity. And the time for the monitoring reports, one of the things we were not doing or issuing our monitoring reports. So they wanted us to actually to time frame that we should do that. And there were some of the things in our finance department, for instance, the voucher receivable process, and then we had just implemented full documentation on invoices, and they want us to actually think about, consider the paying our invoices. However, that didn't happen. We're still actually requiring full reimbursement and documentation for each of our invoices. But overall, the assessment, the exit interview was favorable. We did not actually have in our policies addition for support, but we talked to in the board meeting, we actually talked about the requirement for child support, and so they could actually prove that they did not make that a finding, and they wanted to make sure that in our audit department, the eligible entity single audits were for different programs, because the way our audits were being received, it's the one audit for the agencies, but they wanted to actually make sure that each department was reviewing that agency. And they did not tell us what questions they would be asking the community action agencies, but they did come back and tell us that at that time that the relationship between the office and the entities was a very favorable thing. So they were impressed with that. They said that asked many questions, and they didn't tell us what those questions were, but at that time they told us that the entities were pleased with us, and we were meeting with we meet them monthly rather than quarterly. And at that time, we had 14 Roma trainers within the state, so they felt that we were well on our way to actually implementing Roma state, and they were with one of our agencies that actually had a drug treatment facility in one of the areas. So overall, as Chris has said many times, it was really a good visit, because not only did David share some insight into how we could do things, maybe better, more efficiently. Instead of looking at what he came to look at, he's very easy to talk to, and he's to information. He will tell states that may have a policy that you may use to you could adopt that policy, or if they had any type of manuals that he had seen as he as in his journey across the United States. He's really good at sharing information, and Phil and Alicia, they were helpful as well. So overall, it was a really good visit. Once I wrapped my mind around the fact that they weren't going to take me to jail or anything like that, so it was all good. Yeah.
Okay, Chris or Michelle.
Let's see. Do we have slides in there?
I believe we do. Let me just get to it, Chris.
Okay. I just want to quickly say, the experience was great. And they do have during the exit conference, they did a PowerPoint, which was wonderful. They do start with your best practices. They appreciated our statewide database. It was a very robust repository of data where we get real-time access to information as what's going on. And they liked the STAR assessment, which is our risk assessment tool. We talked about that a lot. The site visit summary, they give you a chance to talk about those site visit summaries, and they were pleased with our interaction with our community action agencies. And I think the most negative comment we received was agencies thought maybe we should do a combined conference with our state association rather than having a conference separate from theirs. And this year we are doing that. We're going to have a combined conference in July. So that was an easy thing to accommodate those agencies. And then they get to the slide about your state assessment observations. In our state, we did have a partial finding in our report. At that time, you don't know if it's going to be a finding, a partial finding, and it was on the tripartite board. We did have a policy in place. It was to make sure that vacancies are filled in 90 days. They really take a hard look at the tripartite board, and they want vacancies to be filled pretty quickly, and they want the states to really monitor that. So our corrective action back to our federal partner was that we're going to look at the tripartite boards and their vacancies on a quarterly basis. We're going to put in some training and technical assistance if agencies are struggling in filling those board seats. If agencies that maybe exceed even farther out on a vacancy, we'll actually start to attend those board meetings. So we put a pretty robust action plan in place that is really good practice for us to make sure the boards have the representation that they need. And we also have a dashboard that helps us to manage the vacancies in the state. We're seeing a lot of agencies look at their bylaws, and they did that when they did organizational standards. standards, they're looking at it and making some adjustments to the size of their board. So we're seeing that just in response to the vacancies. Then opportunity for improvement, they list that. Again, it's the doing a better job of reviewing the tripartite board. We do have a couple of instances. I think there was one instance of an allowable charge in our CSBG. We needed to JV an expense. It was a combined expense. Actually, Jackie, for our NASCAS dues, we charged it all to CSBG, and we moved a portion to DOE. So that's something that we missed. So that's one of the things that they saw. And next slide, it's my last slide for the exit. This is actually the listing of the finding as it appeared in the report. This is the tripartite board and what they required. So great experience, and it was very pleasant. Very competent and very intelligent people. They knew our program. They understood us, and very nice. It's great to. We saw some of them last week at the NASCAS conference. You're starting to build a good relationship with OCS, and this is one of the ways that you can do it. So that was my experience with the exit.
Thank you, Chris. Michelle, did you have anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can go back to my slides.
Yep, I will. Let's see here. All right, so we'll do your first one. There you go.
Okay. So in reviewing, the main thing is they start off with working well, the best practices, and for us, that was our account system and monitoring tools that we use. They did site visits and what agencies were doing well. One agency in particular has a comprehensive case management tracker that they not only use to be able to track the outcomes of individuals and families, but they also use that tracking ability to see which staff have great outcomes, and therefore trying to learn from each of those staff of what is working well. So I think they really like that. Another program has what they call the STAR program, a self-sufficiency program, and had some outcomes as well. And then the other agency had the Inside Out Dads program, which is a fatherhood initiative program where they're working with fathers coming out of jail. So I'm going to go to the next slide. And for us, the main issue for our department was in regards to need line with the federal fiscal year, so that the costs incurred after the end of the contract period requested funds be amended, and that our time for the award of the contract was a 9-month delay because we're on a state fiscal year, and if we align with the federal fiscal year, it will be otherwise seen as a reduction, and then the funds are available. So we are currently, as a result, in the process of moving to a federal fiscal year to make sure, as the recommendations would say, to increase the length of time funds are available to the eligible entities, and considering issuing those awards upon availability. By waiting 9 months, that is a delay in the award, and considering issuing those through the end of the grant period. And then we would then reallocate the funds through the carry forward. It would be outside of that year grant award period. So the OCS reporting process, they developed a formal draft, was supposed to be done within 60 days. Then the state would have 30 days to respond. We did do, but we did not receive our formal draft until 6 months after the fact. But their goal was to be within 30 days. And they won within 30 days of that draft. We still have not necessarily heard of any final decisions regarding our findings and the observation. The key thing I do want to point out, though, in regards to the exit interview and OCS recommendations process, like Chris talked about, Dave Berry and his team are very helpful. Since we were looking to move to a federal fiscal year, we had great concerns about what that meant because, in essence, we've been operating on older money, and because of that, we're at risk of losing a lot of money by moving to a federal fiscal year. So what ended up happening is we had some conversations back and forth with David Berry to make sure what would be the best course of action of having us move forward. So the eligible entities would provide the greatest opportunity to be able to expend those funds instead of us losing those funds. As a result of his, in a way, training and technical assistance us, it really helped us to draft a formal response and figure out a plan of action. So part of what I, recommend to you is don't be afraid. Don't be afraid of trying to talk things out. I mean, even while they were here, we had discussions in regards to that because they were saying, well, there was a negative impact. Well, so the agencies, they knew no different. It was a matter of the awarding process, and so he took that, he heard that, and he was willing to listen. At the same time, I think there was a perception that there is a negative impact on awarding of the agencies. So as a result, one of our responses is not only to change to a federal fiscal year, but also to provide TTA, training and technical assistance, to make sure that agencies understand how to target, how to expend their funds, and weave their funding, maximize their funds to the best most possible. And so that, for our conference, is the biggest focus, is thinking about fiscal accountability, responsibility, and how they can maximize their funds. But the other thing I want to point out is that in the beginning we talked about preparation, and that preparation, we spent a lot of time talking about that, is key, and it really is key. But whether you have an assessment now, know that you're having an assessment in the next year, you're definitely going to be working on this. But if you don't have an assessment now, I encourage you to use that assessment tool, not only one for TTA for your new staff, for your agencies as a guide to providing TTA, but also to organize yourself. Make sure that everything's in line and that you're following protocols that you need to do. One of the things in the process of my preparation that I realized, there were a couple of things that were like, oh, that's contradictory. Oh, that's a problem. And so you mitigate, you look at, okay, what do I need to do to mitigate that? Or what do I need to do to address that moving forward? So whether you have an assessment now, make sure or not, make sure to go through that. So I guess Beverly has anything else to add.
Just one thing, and I know Alicia talked about it a good bit at the conference, and Michelle, you were just talking about the money, and it's very important that make sure finance department is handling the awards, because they have to be spent with a 2-year period, and the drawdowns are very important. They cannot, they draw that money, and I think we had that problem for a long time that we not fully understand that, but our fiscal department did not understand it as well, because we just continued to spend the money until all the funds were gone, but it's not how it's supposed to be. And they look very closely to make sure that at the end of that first year, you discontinue spending. Anything that's left is considered carryover, and you have another year to spend that. And I think Alicia talked about it in at least one of her presentations. And I know that I've talked to some other states, and that's something that has been talked about as well. So that was the only thing I would add to that is make sure that your fiscal department understands how they should be making those drawdowns.
Yeah, this is Chris. I want to make a comment. This thing happened to us. So one of the first questions we got during the on-site was, what was the drawdown procedure like, and how did you account for those dollars? And like you, we just it was our first in, first out kind of methodology in using the grant money. OCS is really looking for us to draw down grant funds with the appropriate grant year. So like grant 17 runs over 2 years, and grant 18 runs over 2 years. And they want us to account for funds based on the grant that's been awarded annually over that 2-year period. We didn't do that, and we are in the process of getting a new counting system. So we gave OCS assurance that we're changing our methodology to accommodate the drawdowns by the appropriate grant year. There is training and technical assistance that we have to provide to the agencies because they're running, there's some overlap. They'll be running grant 17 year 2 funds if there was some, some carry forward, and they're going to start grant year 18 October. So they'll be managing 2 pots of money for CSBG until the one's completed. And we're going to train them that they should finish up spending grant 17 this year so they don't lose any funding. But they could spend both grants at one time depending on the projects that they have in their plans. It's new for them and new for us, but our agencies are good at managing several grants, so they're picking up on it pretty fast. It's the state that is getting our books in line and getting our federal folks to draw down appropriately. I
agree with you, Chris. We're doing the same thing, and the agencies have a problem with it. They understand what we're trying to do. For me, on my end, I have to code it a different way for fiscal.
Yep. So it's a lot of changes for the state, and I think I'd be happy to even specifics with any state that wants to go through that process on how we attempted to do it. I'd be happy to go through those details with you.
Okay, is there anything else that you three would like to add before we open it up to discussion?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, with that, Kyle, can you make sure that everyone is unmuted? So let us know when you've done that. And then what we'll do, though, is once we unmute you, we're going to ask you to mute yourself on your end so we don't get any audio interference.
Everybody unmuted.
Okay, great. Thank you, Kyle. Okay, so remember to mute yourself on your end, and now you'll be able to just ask a question. And again, if you want to type in a question, that's fine as well. In fact, I see we have something, so I'm going to pose it to the 3 panelists, and then you can answer it. It says, we have not yet received an engagement letter, but the OCS is planning on going to the state in early May. At least that's when they're intending to go, and it's only about 6 weeks out. And again, they haven't gotten the engagement letter. So, what do you suggest they do?
This is Beverly, if I might. My question would be take the information that we have shared with you today and start preparing. because the engagement letter did not come. I think my engagement letter didn't arrive until May. It was well after they had requested the list of documents. We had a couple of conversations on the phone. So my engagement letter probably maybe before they did.
I agree with you. I would continue to do your planning and prep. If you ask them for a later date, it just might be a later date in May. So they are sticking to the months that they would like to come. August was a tough month for us to do the audit, and I couldn't get it farther. I think they originally wanted it in July, but I think we arrangements for the first week in August, something like that. So they won't stretch it out too much longer.
And is the engagement, and I want to ask you all of this question just so we're all clear about it. Does the engagement letter I mean, that's the official document, but does that also have the list of documents that they're looking for, or is that something that you get in advance of the engagement letter?
For me, and this is Beverly, for me it was because we had received the documentation list. I think I'm twice in an email from, I think his name is Philip, and had conversations on the phone about what he really wanted. I had sent him information, and then when the engagement letter arrived, it also had the list of documentation with it.
Okay,
but
already received.
Yeah, it was exactly the same list that they had emailed me a month or two prior.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, it's a lot of email requests for documents, and the engagement list has some additional documentation in there.
Okay.
This is Regina from Wyoming, and I think that question about the engagement letter and everything probably came from my colleague Shauna, also on the webinar. I guess for clarification on that too, we haven't received any requests for any documents or anything like that. The first we heard of this was in January 2nd, actually. Our project officer just wrote me an email and says, hey, you guys have been chosen, for an on-site visit, and then asked me about what April and May, or March and April looks like in Wyoming, which I answered honestly what it could look like in Wyoming during that period of time. Then we didn't hear anything, and then so I inquired again, and they says, well, now it looks like the first part of May. But we haven't received anything, requests for documents, no engagement letter, nothing.
Thank you, dear.
I had asked several times via email for my engagement letter, and I didn't get one until my third or fourth request. Once they are ready to work with you, they'll call you, and then they'll set up a meeting like the next day. So I would email, I would call, I would probably send it, for the next few weeks to engage with you.
And for me, we found out in February at NASCAP conference because at that point they had the list of the 6 states that they were going to visit that year, and I'm pretty sure it was late April or early May before we actually heard anything more from them. Then the engagement letter came in June or July.
And this is Michelle from Tennessee. If you look at my timeline would be consistent with the timeline that you're describing. I do believe that OCS contacted me, at least via phone, sometime probably February, in order to go through and walk through what the process would look like, and then send the request for documents. But we too did not receive the engagement letter until much later. My main encouragement to you is to use that assessment tool and go through line by line and make sure that you find those things, have a place for them, know how to access that, how to answer that for yourself, and be detailed in that, in those responses, so that you're prepared to be able to not only answer that, but to be able to access those documents. I said I had one place that was the policy and procedures, but I had another place that had all my work documents, all of my corrective action plans, all of the monitoring reports, corrective action plans and responses, so anything that it asked for, I had all of that information.
Okay, thank you. Anything else that you wanted to add?
I'm good.
Okay. All right, just make sure you mute yourself if you aren't speaking or don't have a question to ask. And then someone did ask, someone did ask, has OCS provided future state assessments for next year? And yes, they have. I think for those folks who were at the conference, OCS was able to connect with those states and talk to them at the conference, and then like Regina said in Wyoming, that she had already been reached out, OCS had already reached out to her. So yes, the states have already been selected for the assessments for 2018 for this year. As far as next year, 2019, that I'm aware of, OCS says that the IM that lists those states for 2018 should be released in the near future. Okay, anybody have any other questions for Chris, Michelle, or Beverly?
This is Jana again. So, because we don't even know what fiscal year we're looking at here, so since ours is going to happen in 18, can you give me an idea? Do you think it would be then from for the right now? I mean, for the 17-18, or are we looking at 15-16 or 14?
For Arkansas, they came to us in 16. In the document list, it lists from 2013 to 2015. So what is that? 3 years. Yeah. So actually, I guess a year. Yeah.
So 3 years from back of that. So then I'm looking at 15 to.
Yeah, that was in 16. They were at Arkansas. So Michelle and Chris, you were both in 17. So can you speak to that?
Well, this is Michelle with Tennessee, and for us, they just looked at 1 year, and they were looking at it, but that'd be 2 federal fiscal years. So it was our state fiscal year, July 1, 17, until they would be there, but that'd actually be 2 federal fiscal years, which would have been 17 and 18, so 15 and 16, yeah.
15, 16.
15 and 16. Okay. How about you, Chris?
They looked at 15 and 16. They were fiscal years, and but it was for CSBG. It was a 2-year funding period for them. So.
Right. And our stuff is on a federal fiscal year, so grateful for that.
Yeah.
So if it's 18, so you would probably be looking at maybe 16 and 17.
17. That's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
16, 17.
That's what I would start planning for.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. That's really helpful, and I just want to say thank you to all of you for sharing your experiences and everything. This is going to be really helpful to us.
Good.
Good. Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Any last words of wisdom from our panelists?
Call Jackie.
Call Jackie.
Ditto.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. And I know that Chris and Michelle and Beverly, I know, and I know a couple of them have said, but even if they didn't say, I know that they are more than willing to answer any of your questions. We also, there's a couple things. One, we recorded this webinar, so we will make sure to send you the recording as well as the slides, because you know that we didn't actually we did not go through all the details and all the slides. So many of them are reference points for you to go back and take a look at. So we will send you the recording and the slides, and they'll be in the Director's Digest, so you'll be able to listen to this again, and you have those resources for yourself as well. And if you're looking for those tools, that 102 is IM 102. We'll actually include that in the Director's Digest along with the self-assessment tool that is on the NASCAS website. But we'll conclude those, so it'll be easy for you to find those two documents.
Thank you.
All right. Well, if there is nothing else, I really want to thank Chris and Michelle and Beverly, because not only did they do this session at our conference last week, but again, and it's been so useful and so informative to everyone. So thank you very much for taking your time and sharing your expertise with all of us.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie.
All right. Everyone have a great day, and tomorrow's Friday.
Woohoo.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.